In section 2 of chapter 6, we're going to take a closer look at graphing linear equations in the two variables. And notice they're repeating what we had mentioned earlier, standard form here. And then we're also going to introduce what is called the x and y intercepts, and graphing after we find those intercepts. So once again, this is something you should have. This is standard form of the linear equation in two variables. And that sounds like a quiz question to me. Now, notice that in order for this to be true, you can't have x and y both be 0. One of them can be 0, but not both. And we'll go over this in some detail. You can pause and read it if you like. And take notes. This is what we will do to graph these. So, letter A here, for example 1, what form is this equation in? Well, you may recall it's in standard form. So what we're going to do is make that t-chart. And often one of the common values that we're going to put in a t-chart here when it's in standard form is we're going to put a 0 there and a 0 there, and then perhaps one other point just to give a variety. Now, why did I pick that? Well, that's the convention. This is what we usually do. So now, if x here is a 0, 2 times 0 is 0, so this becomes a 0. So we're just left with this little equation here. 3y equals 6. Well, we're going to divide both sides by 3, and we get y is 2. Now, if this y here is a 0, 3 times 0 is 0, we get 2x equals 6. We just divide both sides by 2 and we get x is 3. Now if x is 1, getting an additional point, let's put a 1 there. So this would be 2 times 1 plus 3y equals 6. So this is a 2 that I'm going to bring to this side. And we get then 3y. And that would be 6 minus 2 is 4. We get y equals 4/3. So we have a fraction here. Now, if we were to make a graph, and they're going to show this here very shortly, we're going to plot these points. 0, 2. So there's 0. We go up 2. We'll put a dot there. And then 3, 0. 1, 2, 3, 0. And then we have 1, which is 3 1/4, which is like about there. And notice we now have a line that looks like so. And there is the graph of this particular equation. And we found it by making a t-chart, putting some values, and keeping in mind you want to have a 0 there and a 0 there because these are easy to find, and then perhaps one other point. Now the textbook is going to parallel what we've done. They set up their T-chart just a little differently than we have. And they get points as well. And again, there's other points. There's an infinite number of points along the line. But there we got the 0, 2, and we got this other one. And here is some fractions that they were able to plot. But again, there's an infinite number of points along this line. And it goes on, again, infinite direction. And this blue line is actually a representation of this equation and all of these values. All right, here's another. So, a T-chart. Now a 0, a 0, let's say a 2. Now we're going to get some wild points because these are all located near the origin. So if x is a 0, we then have a negative 2y equals 1. So we're going to divide both sides by a negative 2. We get y equals a negative 1/2. And if y is a 0 here, 2 times 0 is 0, we get 1, x equals 1. And then if x is a 2, we're going to get a 2 minus 2y equals 1. Well, I'm going to make x a 3. You might say, why? Well, because by making this 3 to the other side, I get a negative 3 here on the other side. So this is going to become a negative 2. So negative 2y equals a negative 2. So now y is going to equal a 1. So if I had left it as a 2, I was going to get a fraction here. And fractions are rather hard to graph. So let's graph these. I have a 0, 1/2, negative 1/2. So I'll make these lines a little bit bigger so we can see it better. So 0, negative 1/2 is going to be right about there. And then I have 1, 0. So 1, 0 right there. Then I'm going to have 3, 1. So 1, 2, 3, up 1. So again, I now have a nice straight line. And I missed that because this is not proportionate. But the protocol, the strategy we're using to do it is we make a T-chart and we try to shoot not to get fractions here, but we happen to get fractions and then take these values and plot them. And you'll be doing this in MATLAB, and that will take a little practice. I know when I did it using this software, I had to practice a little bit myself. Okay, let's check this one out. So they're making the T-chart, and again they're using other points, and you can choose whatever you like. And they're getting the same there. Notice we had the 1/2 here, negative 1/2. And there we go. Okay, how about something like this now? So we'll make our T-chart. Now here, when it's like this, if we put a 0 here, then if x is a 0, y is a 0. So if we put a 0 there, and this would be a 0. So we need some other points. So we can go 1, let's say 2. Let's see now. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And there are our 3 points. So, sketching a graph, we have it going through the origin here. And then if we have 1, it goes up there. And if we have 2, it goes up there. And again, we have a nice straight line going through the origin. They chose different points, but the results are the same. And there is our 2, 4 right there. Now, another major concept, and we haven't stressed it yet, but we will now, is this concept of intercepts. Now, we have what is called the y-intercept, and we have the x-intercept. Now, intercept means it's connecting with something, and in the y-intercept, the line is going through the y-axis at that y-intercept point. And the value of that, and notice if we take the x and the y, when our x value is 0, whatever is in the y position, x is 0 down here, so whatever is in the y position is what we call the y-intercept. That is where the line will cross the y-axis. And the x-intercept is the same. It's going to be an x comma y, and when y is a 0 here, whatever is in the x position is going to be your x-intercept. Now, if you recall, when we made a t-chart, we said a good method earlier was to put a 0 under the x and then a 0 under the y. Well, by doing that, and let me also mention that the ordered pair sometimes can be written A, comma B, still an ordered pair, X, Y, A, B, that the A would be the x-intercept and the B would be the y-intercept. So we can sometimes put a B here and an A there. And we're going to find that the other way of writing the y-intercept is 0 comma B. Again, they're using the y, but we could substitute the B there. And this would be A comma 0 to indicate the y-intercept, 0 comma B, the x-intercept, A comma 0. Okay, lots of stuff here, and for those that don't know much about this, you're going to have to pause and maybe go over it a couple of times. And let's go on. So, if you see an equation that's in standard form, and they want you to find the intercepts, I will strongly suggest that you make a t-chart that from now and future times we're going to call the X and Y intercept t-chart. Because just by making this t-chart, putting a 0 there and a 0 there, you're going to get the intercepts. So if X is a 0 here, 3y equals 9, y is going to be 3. We just divide both sides by 3. Now if y is a 0, right there, 3 times 0 is 0, x is going to be 9. So if we make our graph, we're going to have 0, 3, 1, 2, 3, a dot there, and then 9, it's going to be out here, comma 0. There are your y-intercepts and x-intercept. I didn't do too straight there. Y-intercept, x-intercept. And the value of this will be 0, comma b, and this is going to be a, comma 0. And again, our actual points, 0, comma 3, and 9, comma 0. Now, they're not putting it in the t-chart, but they're getting the same values. I like the idea of that t-chart. And then when they're plotted, there's your graph. All right, let's do another. So what's the first thing you're going to draw when they give you an equation in standard form if they want you to find the intercepts? Well, it will be an X and Y intercept t-chart. So if X is 0 here, divide both sides by a negative 2, this becomes a negative 6. And if y is a 0, this becomes a 0. Divide both sides by 3, and you get 4. And then to graph it, it's going to be 0, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's your line. And you now have plotted your, in this case, x-intercept, and here the y-intercept. And remember, the formal way of showing this is 0, comma b, and a, comma 0. And of course, this would be the ordered pair. The particular one, this is the general form. Now, we had mentioned before that b is our y-intercept. From that other equation, just reviewing, y equals mx plus b. So whenever we see an equation in this form, whatever is here in this b position will be your y-intercept. And we'll be treating that a little later. Again, I like putting it in the t-chart. But there's your y-intercept. There's your x-intercept. And when we plot it, that's what our graph looks like. Now, they're mentioning this, that generally one of the easy points to plot is your X and Y intercepts using this technique we just had. But sometimes it's necessary to get a third point because your X and Y intercept, one of them might be a decimal fraction, and that would be hard to plot. Okay, here are some practice problems, and you'll be doing some. And if you paused on that and then you want to see your answers, here they are right here. But we'll try to keep this around 20 minutes.